Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Obvious Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Omar. We got Joy on the other line.
Yes. What's going
And
on, everybody?
it's another day, right, guys?
Yes, sir.
Today, we're actually just talking off camera a bit. And one of the things that we were talking about was essentially taking the initiative and applying what you learn. And what we mean by that is we see this often. You guys know through the Obvious Leadership Podcast show that we talk a lot about training and being consistent. And in one of the previous episodes, we had a guest, Damon, and one of the things that he also talked about was not being a fan of doing like a long 8-hour training, that instead it'd be better to break that training up over several weeks, essentially, to be able to not only learn the material, but take the initiative and implement the material. And that's, I think, one of the things that gets lost on people. They think that, hey, let me go to this seminar, let me do this one training, and that's going to be all that I need. And I see this a lot with organizations as well, where, yeah, we're going to bring somebody in to talk to you guys, or we got this training that we're going to do. And they just do a data dump, and they don't give you enough time to be able to take the information and, more importantly, implement it and ensure that it's getting implemented, and then coming back and then essentially doing like a debrief, going over what worked, what didn't work, what we could do a little bit different, and then taking the second meal piece, the second part of something, and taking time to do that, right? It's like, let me just vomit all this information on you, and hey, good luck. And we talked
Yeah,
about this story, right? The cone of learning,
yeah,
how, essentially over time, especially, after a month, it's surprising how much information you're going to forget if you didn't write anything down, or more importantly, if you don't actually practice the information that's given to you, right?
man. So it's interesting that you're talking about this, and I love when we talk about this. It's like certain feelings come to the surface, right? And I hope it kind of reflects on the people that are listening. But honestly, like I feel like you're describing new employee orientation. You know,
And that's even
because
if they do a new employee orientation. Most companies, they just throw a person in front of a computer, and it's like,
yeah,
all right, as long as you check it.
yeah,
And
right, right. You watch this video and like it's supposed to be informational. It's supposed to be kind of leading you along the path to success, but there's no implementation, right? There's nothing that you can do to practice that skill that they're trying to convey and actually apply it to what you're trying to do. And
here's the thing, like,
yeah,
here's the thing, Jerry, right? With that, like, it's not, don't get me wrong, it's not bad to go through a course training like that, but going back to taking time to implement it, right? Like, okay, cool, you did a portion of the course. We're going to touch base again in a week, and you're going to come back after you learned it. And obviously, in a large setting like that, it should be one of the leaders on the floor. They should be a leader, right? And not just have the management title and doesn't know how to lead teams.
right.
But they should focus on making sure that you actually implemented the material, right? And following up, and not just, all right, what you got for today? Okay, well, I need you to get 2 more of this, or I need you to hit, 1,000 or whatever, right? Whatever the goal is. That's
Yeah,
not that's not the point. You should be able to take the information, have time to implement it, come back and reflect on it, and then get the second part and do it. But most companies don't do that. They'll just throw somebody in front of a computer, take these courses, check it off my list, so that I can just tell the higher ups, yeah, you got it done.
right.
If you don't remember, if you didn't retain that information, that's on you, because it's not my job as a leader of this company to ensure that my staff understands what we're doing.
Well, so what you're explaining to me, man, like I said, it's just like, I don't know why these things come to mind, but I'm like, so what you're saying is that the sales leader is not a walking scoreboard.
Let me just
That
check things off.
Right. I mean, yes, numbers are important to kind of judge where you are going, where what you're doing throughout the day or throughout the month or however that is, right? But
Yeah.
that's all that they are, right? It's what kind of insight can you provide, and kind of course correct, like that. That's what the leaders they're supposed to be, not just a scoreboard to say, hey, look, this is what your score is, go do better, or that's not what it's supposed to be. But I mean, I think, like, when you talk about implementation, right? And
Yeah.
I feel like there needs to be an effective listening skill that you need to develop around that, right? And also part of that is teaching somebody how to listen, right? When you come to new employee orientation, whatever the case is, um, encourage people to take notes, right? Write
Yeah.
something down. If something makes you feel a certain way at a certain time, take the time to write it down, because like we were saying, if it's an 8-hour training and that moments may happen throughout that training, but if you're not taking the time to write it down, reflect afterwards, right? And
Yep.
then practice what, maybe improving on whatever it is that came to mind, then you're doing yourself a disservice, right? And
Not
as
just
the speaker,
your and not just yourself. Think of like the organization. Think of it like
right?
this. I own my business and I'm not taking time to invest in my team to make sure my employees to make sure they understand how the business is going to run. Because guys, at the end of the day, if you're a small business owner, if you own the business, none of your employees are going to be as invested in the business as you will be. Okay. And that's an important thing. They will have drive to want to participate and to want to be part of it, but they don't have that drive. And then when you take that and blow it up to like a larger organization, whether it's privately owned or whether it's publicly traded, it's the same thing. They're not going to have the same drive as the people who started the company. That doesn't mean that they won't be motivated. It means you have to make sure you have the right staff in place to lead those people to ensure that they want to be motivated, that they want to participate, that they want to stay in, and that they will drive towards the results that we want to go after. You don't want to be like that. That CEO that during the COVID period or right after, right? You guys remember this? Uh, the Zoom video leaked out about her berating her salespeople about who cares about bonuses? You should be focusing on hitting this. Who cares? It's like, yeah, if your team is not going to get a bonus, why are we going to try to get you a bonus to make you look good? You know?
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, as a leader, you should care about where your people are, right? I mean, that's the whole point about it, right? And you got to make sure that you're invested in them learning the skills that they need to make you successful as a company, but also them successful as a person, right? And I feel like
Yeah.
that's where and that's an important part of any training process. You always have to be improving, right? And there's always going to be a struggle to move forward, right? But the way that you make sure that you are crawling forward at any cost is to make sure that you're retaining some of the things that you're learning, right? You
Yeah.
have to learn from your mistakes.
Well, not only that, think about it, right? So you go in for an 8-hour data dump. What information is going to be really good and practical now, and what information is going to be really good and practical in a week, in a month, in a year? Like it's so much being dropped on you, and there's no implementation tools. There's no way for me to truly take the initiative to go after what you just said and try to implement it. And I'm not going to say everybody, I'm not going to say, out of 1,000 people, you're not going to find at least one person that will be able to do it. And typically that one person is somebody who has the skill set, who has taken time to develop these different type of skills to be able to learn, retain, and realize what is good to use and what they just don't need to focus on because they may already have it in their skill set. But the
Yeah.
issue becomes with the leadership because the leadership isn't going to drive the initiative for people to use the information. It's like, all right, cool guys, we gave you an 8-hour training. Do with that information as you wish.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like what?
Honestly, man, like I said, I've been to a lot of those trainings. I've been to weekend trainings. I've been to however long the course may be. But the like where I really feel like I've gotten the most out of something is when, what throughout the training they do like a guess and check kind of thing, or like apply it and try to build something around what you've learned. And that's really what makes it stick for me, right? But also the same thing, when you write something down, there's a connection between your brain and when you write something down. When you go back and read what you were writing down, like you can visualize, at least for me, I can visualize, oh, this is what that person was saying, right? And this is the mindset I was in. And it takes me down that same thought process so that you can remember that feeling. Yep. Like, oh man, like this is so powerful, like this is how I felt. And that's how I feel like you get the most out of those trainings.
And Joe, you're hitting something, right? Because that's actually, it's a psychological trick. It actually has something to do with writing things down. And actually, it's almost like you're imprinting it in your brain. And because I can tell you this, I've read books, I've highlighted, I've underlined, I've rewritten through notes, passages in books for information I want to retain that I haven't opened up that book in maybe a decade.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember the information.
Yeah.
Right? I'll still be able to implement the information. It's funny because my wife's like, how do you remember all this stuff? Right. Or I'll grab a book and I was like, I could swear it's on this page and I haven't touched the book in like a year or two. He's like, how do you know where that's at? And it's one of those. I've written down, I've taken notes, I've taken, a highlighter, I've highlighted it. It's actually a rule of 3. If you've never heard of it, you read something, you highlight it, which makes you reread it again. And then you go back and you underline it, which once again makes you reread it again. And you've done it 3 times. So you're more likely to retain the information. And that's one part of it. And I told her, I was like, I've gone through this because I've read the book again. I've reread the parts that I've highlighted, that I've underlined. So it just imprinted where, yeah, it's on this page. It's like page whatever. I don't know the page number. I just physically can grab the book and turn to it, whether I've highlighted it or whether it's a brand new book. That's the crazy thing. But it is a psychological change that happens. It's almost like a psychological imprint. So there is some science to that. Also the science behind implementation and chunking information so that you can have time in between to implement the information you're going through, to implement the best practices so that you can actually start to see something out of it. And it also goes back to what we had talked to with Damon, right? The small wins. You're able to get those small wins, which wants you to do more because you're getting a pretty much like a high off of it because you're winning. It's like, I just hit the jackpot. I just hit the lottery.
Yeah. I mean, it's that positive reinforcement, right? And, like definitely with the small wins, but I like what you said about the chunks, right? It's, you do things in chunks, right? And you see the benefits and then you do another chunk, right? And then you're like building upon your foundation of changing a process or whatever the case is, right?
Yeah.
And that's what leads you to success.
Big time. Guys, I think we're going to end up cutting this one short. It's a lot.
This is something that applies to many aspects of leadership, right? So most we can go all day, all night, man. So, but yeah, we want to appreciate you guys for stopping by. Please, hit that like and subscribe. Leave a comment if that's something that you guys can relate to. And a certain point in time where y'all been through a certain training, you've written it down, and that's really what made the difference. But we'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, let us know. All right, guys. Want to thank you for joining us again. Y'all have a great night.
All right. See y'all later.
And that brings us to the end of today's Obvious Leadership episode. Remember, every great leader starts with one step, and you're already on your way. Small changes lead to significant impact. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, and remember that leadership is the key to unlocking extraordinary results.